Hey, it's Brandon from Baby Blue Memories. Please like and subscribe. Each subscription gets us closer towards achieving our goal of 1,000 subs. Now, enjoy the video.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for joining us. It's Brandon from Baby Blue Memories. Give us a like and a subscription, please, because each and every single subscription helps us out. We really appreciate it. We need to have a little bit of fun here. I know these are some very trying times. Let's rock and roll, shall we, with Irrelevant or Relevant. Is your favorite NHL team relevant? Now, I want to get into the whole relevance scheme here. For example, a team which maybe has won a few Stanley Cups, has some great players, but is doing terribly this year, they might, not be considered relevant right now, but this is a look in terms of 100 years. So we're going to look at 100 years, so it's how the team is, their success, as well as how they fit in their specific city. Are they embraced? Are they loved? Etc. And have they had any success over their duration in the NHL? We're going to start in the Atlantic Division with the first team, the Boston Bruins. So we're going to go blue for relevant, red for irrelevant. Now the Boston Bruins, B-Town has always been a Red Sox heavy city. The Celtics have the most NBA championships, and the Patriots literally have the greatest NFL dynasty ever. But it's a Red Sox town, and the Bruins still leave their mark in the city. They have Bobby Orr, they have Phil Esposito, they've won 5 Stanley Cups, they played in the original 6. Bobby Orr is probably the greatest defenseman to ever play the game. And they have another great defenseman, I'd say top 15 all time, right now it's Zdeno Chara, who's still playing out his career in B-Town. Boston Bruins, relevant NHL team. We didn't even have to go that far in depth, but we did. Alright, we're going to move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now this is one of the more challenging teams because they've only been around for about 25 odd years or so. They do have a Stanley Cup, and they are playing in a city which is not necessarily known to be a hotbed in terms of hockey in Tampa Bay. But this franchise has great support, and even through the lean years, so like 2008, 2009 on to about 2013 or so, when Steve Yzerman first took over the reins, they still had support. And I know they had that whole forgettable 12-game experience under Barry Melrose back in the 07-08 season, I believe it was. But this team has numerous trophy winners. They have Martin St. Louis, who played there, Vinny LeCavalier. They have Victor Hedman, who's won a Norris Trophy. They have Steven Stamkos. And they will have Hart and Art Ross Trophy winner Nikita Kucherov. That Stanley Cup definitely helps too, and the team had support even when they were not doing well. Tampa Bay, relevant team in the NHL. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. As a Detroit Red Wings fan, there's this old saying of 7 days a week. One time the most annoying fan base is the Boston Bruins. One time it's the Chicago Blackhawks. One time it's the Montreal Canadiens. The other 4 times it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. But let's be honest, the Leafs have 12 Stanley Cups. They have some of the greatest players who have ever played the game don their jerseys. And Toronto is basically the hotbed of hockey worldwide. Hockey Hall of Fame's in Toronto for a reason. Maple Leafs, relevant NHL team. And they've had some rough years since the lockout in 04-05. They missed the playoffs every year from 04-05 up until the lockout shortened 2012-2013 season. They have not won a playoff series in over 15 years. Relevant NHL team. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers. Now, the Panthers in 1995, of course, or 95-96, were famous for winning the Eastern Conference, making it to the Stanley Cup Final, and have it rain rats every time they scored. Since then, they've struggled with arena issues, attendance issues, and literally every single preseason turnout game is a meme. Heck, it might even be regular season by this point. But the Panthers are a good team now. They have Joel Quenneville, they have Sergei Bobrovsky, but in the long run, they haven't won a Stanley Cup playoff series since that 95-96 season. They're consistently mentioned amongst teams that are in the midst of relocation rumors. Not relevant right now. The Panthers. And by the way, these are just my predictions. You have every right to feel free and disagree with me. Mention in the comments who you think is relevant or irrelevant. Next up, we have the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, 24 Stanley Cups. Maurice Richard, Guy Lafleur, Jean Beliveau, the late great Henri Richard, who passed away about 2 weeks ago, Jacques Plante, Ken Dryden. Even today, they have Carey Price in between the pipes. Their fan base is supportive. Their fan base bleeds red, white, and blue Montreal Canadiens. Habs, easy choice. The Yankees are a relevant fan team in their league. The Canadiens, not quite successful nowadays. They haven't won a playoff series since 2015. They haven't made it to the Stanley Cup Finals since 1993, but they're relevant, and they're always going to be relevant. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres. This one was one of the harder decisions that I had to make because the Sabres have history. And the Sabres have a great fan base. Sabres fans are loyal. But they haven't made the playoffs since 2011. Over 3,000 days ago. They've wasted the careers of Jack Eichel up to this point. I really hope that they get on track and they don't waste his career and they don't waste the career of Rasmus Dahlin. Attendance is starting to plummet a little bit, and I just don't think that they've played themselves to being a relevant franchise up to this point. It could change, but right now I'm saying no. Same thing with Ottawa, the Senators. Good gosh. The 2019-2020 season was going pretty quietly for the Senators, which is a good thing because they weren't the laughingstock that they were last year. They were ahead of a few teams in the standings. Brady Tkachuk looks like a diamond in the rough kind of find at number 4 overall. And, they had stayed out of the news until Eugene Melnyk fired Jim Little as CEO 54 days into his tenure. This means it'll be the 5th CEO to take over the reins under Eugene Melnyk in 3 years. Boy, it seems like it's been a lot longer than 3 years since the Senators made it to the Eastern Conference Final in Game 7. They don't have an arena in downtown Ottawa. It's a nightmare to navigate by car and inaccessible by public transportation. The suburb is like 30 minutes away from downtown Ottawa. And the fan support is plummeting right there in terms of attendance markers. Senators, irrelevant NHL team up to this point. Last but not least in the Atlantic Division, they're last place overall in the league right now. The Detroit Red Wings, my favorite team. Look, they have 11 Stanley Cups. They are fabricated in the heart of the Motor City. We think of Detroit, we think of the Red Wings. Like that might be the first sports team that you think of when you think of the Motor City. You think of the Red Wings. They have Olympia, they have Gordie Howe, they have Terry Sawchuk. They have great memories in Joe Louis Arena, the last great dynasty of the 1990s. Red Wings, relevant NHL team. Rally Al, they have the 1954 Stanley Cup, which of course was the 8 legs on the octopus, and that's what it represented, and that's why they have the mascot being the octopi to this day. Fun fact, the New York Rangers are the only team in the league right now without a mascot because Gritty became the mascot of the Flyers. Speaking of the Rangers, that's an easy choice too. We're going to put them in the relevant section. I know they didn't win a cup for 54 years, but how can you forget Matteau behind the net, swings to the front, scores! Matteau, Stefan Matteau! And the Rangers have one more hill to climb, baby! It's Mount Vancouver! New York is headed to the finals! Mark Messier's guarantee, Henrik Lundqvist in between the pipe, Andy Bathgate. They have so many players that have gone to that team throughout the years. And I know in the 50s and the 60s it was a rough time for them. Rangers, easy choice, relevant NHL team. Hey, they played through the original 6, man. If you survived through the original 6 era, you survived World War II, you survived World War I, going back to some teams like the Canadiens and the Leafs. They also survived the 1919 flu pandemic, the Spanish influenza pandemic. Rangers, easy choice, put them on this side of the board. Washington Capitals. You know what? They were the sorriest, saddest franchise in the league for so long. They had 4 Eastern Conference game victories to show for it in their first 34 odd years or so. Not even 40, 42, 43 odd years until the 2018 Stanley Cup run. But Alex Ovechkin gives that team a name. When you think of the Capitals, you think Alex Ovechkin. And sometimes it might take more than just one player, but that one player alone right now, I think, will keep them relevant. I'm giving them relevancy, Washington. 2018 Stanley Cup definitely doesn't hurt. But you'll notice there'll be a couple of Stanley Cup winners later on who I don't consider to be relevant NHL teams. Philadelphia Flyers, passionate fan base. Their whole stadium is packed with orange game in and game out. The fan support is there. They have really what's the word I want to use? They've really fabricated themselves as well into the make and the model of the city of brotherly love. Flyers, relevant NHL team. I'm gonna put them on this side of the board. And the same thing goes for their fellow Keystone State rival, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Look, if you have Jaromir Jagr, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, and Mario Lemieux, who have all played for you and have all won Stanley Cups for you. Let's not forget Paul Coffey was there. They were literally, I think, that David Volek goal away from three-peating back in 1993. This is a relevant NHL team that floundered in the early 2000s. They were bankrupt, and there was a big scare in terms of the Penguins not being able to secure funds for a new arena. Thought the team would relocate. That seems so long ago. Penguins, relevant NHL team. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, this team moved from Hartford back in 1997-98 and became the Hurricanes. And since winning the Stanley Cup in 2006, have struggled with attendance. In fact, their woes in Carolina rivaled the attendance woes that the team had in Hartford, a city which is about 1/3 the size of Raleigh. And the Hurricanes had gone 10 years without making the playoffs. They were consistently ranked at the bottom in terms of attendance, along with Arizona, Florida, and the New York Islanders. Hurricanes, I know they have a Stanley Cup. I can't see them being a relevant team. They're not a relevant NHL franchise right now. Next up, we have the New York Islanders. They won 4 Stanley Cups in the 1980s, early 1980s. But that was in Nassau County. That was in Uniondale. That was on the island. This team's playing in Brooklyn. The most famous thing about that arena is the damn car. This team hasn't done anything since David Volek's goal in 1993 other than give us those awful frozen meal-esque fisherman jerseys in the late 1990s. The 2 best players they've had since then are Ziggy Palffy and John Tavares, both of whom got the hell out of there as soon as they possibly could. And they don't play in their home anymore. And they're still struggling with attendance despite having a pretty good team. They've won 2 playoff series since 1993. Islanders have played themselves from being a relevant franchise to irrelevant. Irrelevant franchise in the NHL. And another team which has done as much as they possibly could to get to that point is the New Jersey Devils. The Devils won 3 Stanley Cups in 1995, in 2000, and 2003, and they made a Stanley Cup final in 2012. Martin Brodeur is one of the 5 greatest goalies to ever lace up the skates. We associate the Devils still with a trap system that they played under Jacques Lemaire, which they haven't played in at least over a decade. They got a new arena in 2007-08, and have had struggles with their attendance since then. Since making the finals in 2012, they've won 1 playoff game. And you know what? Right now, they've played themselves from being relevant to irrelevant. And they play in New Jersey. They play in New Jersey. Literally within a 50-kilometer radius, they are probably the 4th most popular team on a good day. 5th, if the Islanders are doing good in that particular year. New Jersey Devils. Wayne Gretzky once called this team a Mickey Mouse organization. And they're doing dreadfully this year. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 relevant teams, and we have 6 irrelevant teams. We're going to have 7 now because the Columbus Blue Jackets are next. They've won 1 playoff series in franchise history. They did not make the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first 9 years of their franchise's history. The 2 best players in franchise history are Rick Nash and Artemi Panarin, superstar wingers who they could never find a center for, and they both left. They're both gone. Sergei Bobrovsky is gone as well. I like what John Tortorella has done, though, with this team. I thought this team would be dead in the water this year. Unfortunately, they're not a relevant hockey team. Next up, we're going to move to the Central Division, aka the Western Conference, and we're going to take a look at the Colorado Avalanche. When you think about the Avalanche, you think Joe Sakic, you think Patrick Roy, you think Peter Forsberg. Nowadays, you'll think Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, and that rivalry they had with Detroit. If they didn't win those 2 Stanley Cups and didn't have those great players, that rivalry with Detroit would still give them some sort of relevance. Denver is a great sports town. You look at every league, the Nuggets, they got a great fan base. The Broncos, they have a great fan base. The Rockies have been dreadful for years, but the fans still come out because Coors Field is that beautiful. You're in the mountains. You're the only real source of a big population between San Francisco and St. Louis. Colorado Avalanche. Relevant NHL team. Next up, the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues had, for 51 years, been literally the king of getting knocked out in the first or second round. They once made it to the Stanley Cup playoffs 25 straight seasons, and in 23 of those years, lost in the first or second round. They made it to the conference final twice during that time. They had never won a Stanley Cup final game until last year when they won their first Stanley Cup. But the Blues fans have been supportive despite a bit of a downturn after the NHL lockout in the 04-05 campaign. But the Blues fans are loyal. St. Louis is a very good sports town. They just lost their Rams. You can bet you any money they're never going to lose their Blues. A relevant sports team, a relevant sports franchise, St. Louis. Next, we're going to move to the Dallas Stars. Now, the Stars moved from hockey's hotbed in the United States back in 1993, Minnesota, to become the Stars. They were once known as the North Stars. Funny fact, this team and the California Golden Seals once combined as a team. So the Cleveland Barons / California Golden Seals all became the Dallas Stars, or then the Minnesota North Stars, as they were known. Dallas has won 2 playoff series in the last decade. They've been very inconsistent in terms of winning years. This year, I think, if the season does continue, would be the first time that they made back-to-back postseasons since 2007 and 2008. The Stars, you know what? Dallas, it's a tough market for them because the Mavericks have played their way into the hearts of the fans in that city. The Cowboys are always going to be number 1. They're literally America's team. Like, they might be the most relevant franchise in all of sports. I'm going to go irrelevant on the Dallas Stars until they get a couple of more things done. They do have that 1 Stanley Cup, but I just like the Hurricanes. You know, the Hurricanes and the Devils and the Islanders, they've all won cups. I can't put the Stars in as a relevant team right now. They could play their way back in, but right now I have them on the outside looking in. Next up, we're going to look at the Winnipeg Jets. That team is loved in that city. Take it from me, I lived in Winnipeg for a year. The whole city bleeds Winnipeg Jets blue. The Blue Bombers attracted over 40,000 fans for a Grey Cup parade. I think you would have to multiply that tenfold at least to 400,000 if the Jets ever won a Stanley Cup. And remember, Manitoba has about 1.2 million citizens. Winnipeg proper has about 650,000. They're the smallest market in the NHL. Their fans love them, but they've won 2 playoff series in franchise history. They've only been around for 20 years. Now, the old Jets with Dale Hawerchuk, if they were a continuous franchise, they'd be about 47, 48 years old at this point. I might put them in relevance, but right now there's still that awful Atlanta Thrashers stench about the Jets. Irrelevant NHL franchise. And by the way, you can be irrelevant, but it doesn't mean that I want you to move. Like, I wouldn't want to see Ottawa, Buffalo move. I don't think that the Jets should move. But, you know, they're not necessarily relevant NHL sports teams. Minnesota Wild, another team similar to the Jets. They got their hearts broken in 1993 when they moved the team. Norm Green moved the team from Minnesota to Dallas. Can you imagine? How could you leave? Anyway, that's besides the point. Minnesota Wild have won a grand total of 4 playoff series. They've made it past the first round of the playoffs 3 times. They have some bad contracts on this team. I don't think they'll make the playoffs even if the NHL season continues at this point. Wild, their best players ever are Marian Gaborik, who was there for like 7-8 years and then moved away, and Mikko Koivu, who is not the flashiest name and definitely not the guy that's going to win you big-time awards. Wild, stay in Minnesota, stay in St. Paul. St. Paul/Minnesota, the Minneapolis, Twin Cities, a great place to have a sports team, the only sense of a big-time metropolis in between Seattle and Chicago. But the Wild, I don't have them as a relevant NHL franchise. Which might surprise you with the pick that I'm going to go with here. The Nashville Predators. They won the Western Conference title in 2017. Have made a great recovery since 2006. The attendance numbers were down. I think they were averaging under 14,000 fans for those first couple of years after the lockout. The barn is packed every night. They're all wearing yellow. Country music has like a nice little twist when it comes to hockey. You know, Mike Fisher played there for a while, Mr. Carrie Underwood, if you will. You know, he really helped revitalize that team as well. And we call them Smashville. We associate them with a specific style of play. Nashville Predators, relevant NHL team. So that leaves us up to our last Central Division team. You know, the Chicago Blackhawks were on the verge of contraction in the 1950s and the 1960s, and after the 2004-05 lockout, the Blackhawks were very low in attendance up until the 2007-2008 campaign. But they have the Golden Brett, they have Stan Mikita, they have Pierre Pilot, they had Tony Esposito play there, and then of course now they have Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, they have 6 Stanley Cups, they played in the original 6. Easy score. Chicago, a great sports town. Blackhawks, a relevant NHL team. We're on now to the Pacific Division, where we have 3 teams from California, 2 teams in the desert, and 3 teams in Canada. We're going to start with the teams in the desert. Vegas Golden Knights. Look, if the Vegas Golden Knights left the NHL, I know they're popular and they're kind of that catchy fad, but Seattle might be the same in a couple of years. Vegas Golden Knights, I kind of feel unfair to put them in the irrelevant place right now, but let's see what happens when the Golden Knights start to struggle and when the Raiders take over that town, because that is going to be an Oakland or a Vegas Raiders town in the next couple of years. We'll see how the Golden Knights respond after that. And then the Arizona Coyotes. Might be the most irrelevant franchise in the NHL right now. Constantly under the threat of relocation rumors. Could never get a deal done to get a brand new stadium in their city. Though Phoenix is a rapidly expanding metropolis, a lot of the fans out there and a lot of the people out there are kind of transplants from different communities who rather support some of the other teams from wherever they grew up versus support the local teams. And we've seen the Diamondbacks, we've seen the Cardinals, and especially the Coyotes, and even the Suns all struggle with attendance woes. Arizona Coyotes, most irrelevant franchise in the NHL right now, would not be a bad thing to have them relocate. But they did produce Austin Matthews. Even a broken clock, I guess, is right twice a day. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks. Now, this team's been around since 1991-92. Funny fact, the Bay Area failed before. when the California Golden Seals and the Oakland Seals were around, that area did not support hockey. The only thing you can remember about the Seals were those nasty figure skating looking skates that their players wore as a fashion statement back in 1970, 71, I think it was. But now the fans in San Jose, it's the only expansion. It's the only professional team amongst the Big Four. They have the Earthquakes in MLS as well. But the Sharks have had great support since day one. And they've had a pretty successful team making it to the final in 2016. Another one of those under 30 teams, which I'm going to put as relevant. San Jose Sharks, relevant NHL team. LA Kings. Look, they've won 2 Stanley Cups. You know, they made it to the Western Conference Final 3 straight seasons. But this team is always going to be relevant because they got Wayne Gretzky. Now, look at all this other teams we have up here. Vegas, Arizona, Dallas, Florida, Tampa Bay, San Jose, Anaheim, who we'll get to in a bit. Nashville. None of these teams existed before Wayne Gretzky moved to Los Angeles in 1988. The Gretzky trade. We call it the Gretzky trade. It's still a huge trade. It's probably the biggest trade to this day in NHL history. A landmark like that, plus 2 Stanley Cups. Los Angeles Kings, relevant NHL team. And they've been there for 52 years. Relevant NHL team. Anaheim Ducks are next. Now, I know California is huge. The Los Angeles area is huge. Orange County is big. But the Ducks, if you've noticed, even in the playoffs, when they were playing Calgary, when they were playing Detroit, when they were playing Chicago, Vancouver, the Ducks would have a hard time. The fans would have a hard time being louder than the fans of the opposing team. And they still get low attendance despite having one of the more successful runs from 2013 on to this day. They won a Stanley Cup in 2007. I love Timo Solani. I love the whole Mighty Ducks brand, but it's not the Mighty Ducks anymore. That's why the Anaheim Ducks are irrelevant. Keep those Anaheim Mighty Ducks jerseys, and you know what? And the Mighty Ducks team name, and maybe they'd be on this side. And last but not least, we have the 3 Canadian teams out in the West. Edmonton Oilers, Calgary Flames, Vancouver Canucks. Now, Vancouver hasn't won a Stanley Cup, but they've come awfully close on a couple of occasions. Their building is rocking every single night, and it looks like the team is finally starting to turn the corner. They've had great players come through there, and I know they haven't won a Stanley Cup. They're due for one in the next 5 years or so. Vancouver Canucks, they're loved by their team. They're loved by that entire province. Vancouver Canucks, relevant NHL team. And the same thing will go for the Calgary Flames. They just got a new stadium signed, so the Flames are going to stay there. Calgary, we think about the only team to ever win a Stanley Cup on the Montreal Forum ice, not named the Canadiens. Or not from the city of Montreal. Calgary Flames, relevant NHL team. They've had Theo Fleury play there. They've had Lanny McDonald, scoring that game winner. Mike Vernon, Al McInnes, Joe Nieuwendyk. Flames, relevant NHL team. And last but not least, the Oilers. I don't even think this one should really be that complicated. They had Wayne Gretzky playing there. They had Mark Messier playing there. Paul Coffey, Jari Kurri, Esa Tikkanen, Glenn Anderson, Grant Fuhr. We can go on and on and on. And even in this day, they have a brand new arena. They are adored and loved by the team. That has been an absolute pile of dung since they made it to the finals in 2006. And now they have Connor McDavid. He is single-handedly the most exciting player in the National Hockey League right now. Edmonton Oilers, relevant NHL franchise. So that gives us 18 relevant franchises and 13 irrelevant franchises. I'd love to hear from you. What's your take? Who do you think is relevant and irrelevant in the NHL nowadays? And thank you for joining us here on Baby Blue Memories. We got to keep strong here during these tough times. Stay safe, everyone. Wash your hands, and hopefully in a few years when I watch this video, I'll have a laugh because it'll mean that we've gotten through this COVID-19 pandemic. Again, leave a comment in the comment section and give us a subscription. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.